Welcome into the best damn college football show out there. December 1st, we're breaking down this week's college football games, the big ones. And it is Group of Five with my buddy Ralph Michaels on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Ralph, welcome in. How you feeling?
Doing good. It was a nice break with the Thanksgiving holiday, but college hoops, it's refreshing waking up in the morning and having to do these day games, and then there's night games, and then following the hoops all day long. I love the start of college basketball season. It can get a little frazzled, with all the sports happening at the same time, but I'm so thankful that we have college basketball.
So am I, Ralph. It's a fun sport to bet. It's, in my opinion, the best sport to bet right here with college football. And you speak to, this time of year being frazzled. It's tough on the sports bettors. I'm with you. It's just a lot to keep up with, but you got to keep in mind it's tough on the odds makers as well. So it could be a great time for sports bettors to win, Ralph.
Really, on Wager Talk today, we had a sportsbook guy on, Dave Sherpin, and he was talking about how when bookmakers get together, they're happy just to break even in December college hoops because there's 357 teams minus the Ivy League and 2 teams in the MEAC that sat out, but everyone else is playing. So, we see totals move 8 or 9 points. We see sides move 3 or 4 points. They're putting out a number, hoping their number isn't going to get bashed. If you have information in college basketball, it is the one time to make money right now in December. It is the absolute best sport to make money any time of the year if you have that type of information. So do your work. We'll see. I had a play yesterday. Patino is at Iona now, and Patino always hems and haws his teams. But he really went in depth how struggling his team was to start the year. We talked about Calipari in Kentucky. They have Kansas tonight. He's talked about having his 4 freshman starters really struggling this year. So make sure you do a lot of reading. Look at those coaches that are first-year coaches. Look at those coaches that have a lot of freshmen. Look at those teams that have had to sit down with COVIDs, and don't be afraid to play against them. And, I normally don't look at line moves. When I'm handicapping college football, when I'm handicapping the NFL, when I'm handicapping college basketball in January, if a line moves with me or against me, I don't care. I feel confident in my number. I am going to post my play with my number, and I don't care who bet what. But even the first few weeks of November, when I'm trying to catch up with college basketball, there are a few very sharp groups out there that it's the only time in the entire season, Drew, that I prefer to be on a move if it's a point move or a sharp move, because those people betting college basketball at 7:30 a.m. Pacific on a Tuesday morning aren't your recreational bettors. Those are sharp groups trying to get the best numbers. So, I know they have success. I've followed some of those groups. So really, it's the only time that I don't mind coming behind a game that moved as long as it didn't move too much. And, while we're talking hoops, Drew, I know we're talking to college football. We'll get to it in 1 second. I know you've been a totals guru. I know that you've been one that has really used quality over quantity, that you don't use a ton of plays. But, boy, when you find those isolated situations, you've had incredible success, and you discounted your college basketball season down to $4.99?
I believe so, yes.
Well, tell us.
Yeah, no. I mean, you bring up December. I would say December and January college basketball is the best time of the year to win. I just think, going over what I've bet and like you talked about, finding the sharp sides is the way to go about it. So, yeah, Ralph, I mean, college basketball, and guys out there, I know we've already taken up 4 minutes talking about college basketball. It's something that, I'm not 100% sure what we're doing here, but it will be something on the channel all the time. If not with Ralph and other people, I'll start it up. So, guys, we're going to have a lot of college basketball here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel, no doubt about it. But we do have college football, Ralph, and it's a big week. I mean, especially if you like the small conferences, which we're going to be talking 3 games here. on today's show, guys. We got a Thursday night, a Friday night, and a Saturday game. We also got a degenerate special as well. We're going to break down these 3 games in depth, all in the group of 5, except for the degenerate special, which is kind of a flip on things. And check out Ralph, wagertalk.com. We got the special here, guys. The Cyber Week. It's not only Cyber Monday here at Wager Talk and Sports Memo, it's Cyber Week, and you get 6 months for under $100, any handicapper you want. So check that out, Wager Talk and sportsmemo.com. Shout out to the chat box here. We got Robert Rainey, a truck driver that likes listening to the show here, Ralph. He's a big fan of yours. Went 2-3 with you yesterday. Welcome in Davy Jones as well. Mike Campbell, St. Francis UVA over his favorite bet today. So yeah, guys, feel free if you're watching live on simulcast on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Feel free to chime in on the chat box, what you're looking to do, what you're looking to bet today. And we're going to be breaking down these 3 games in depth, hopefully get you on some right sides. Welcome in Johnny Outlaw as well. Ralph, we got Thursday, December 3rd here. The later game, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, Air Force at Utah State. This one on CBS Sports Network. We got Air Force minus 10-point road favorites in Logan, Utah, 51 being the total. I'll throw it over to you, Ralph. Are you looking to bet a certain side or total in this Mountain West affair on Thursday night?
Well, last week, I think we talked about it a little bit on the show. I leaned New Mexico, a very bad team going into Utah State. That was the worst team statistically in college football, getting outgained by 270 yards, had jettisoned their head coach, Gary Anderson, had split ways with their FBS transfer quarterback, Jason Shelley. So you were left with an interim coach and a new quarterback. And it just goes to show you, even though that Utah State team was statistically worse in football, you still can't take a team like New Mexico that doesn't know how to win on the road and lay those big points to them. They laid a complete egg. It was a situation they're not used to. And I was on New Mexico and was one of the worst picks of the year. And, it didn't take long for me to realize that. So, I was thinking the COVID situation took hold at Utah State and they were going to quit. Well, there's a lot of times you get rid of a coach, and if they like the assistant that's taken over the interim, they do start playing for him. He has fun in practice. There's nothing to lose. You start lightening things up. You start playing some kids that maybe shouldn't have played. And then you also look at Utah State, the top 3 teams in the Mountain West. Clearly, it's clear cut, the best 3 teams, Boise, San Diego State, and Nevada. Guess what? Utah State's first 3 games at Boise, home against San Diego State, at Nevada, and then you add in Fresno State. So, I look at Utah State and I say, well, okay, I made a bad play against New Mexico. So now, is the 41 points and 452 yards they put up against New Mexico because they did so well or New Mexico did so poorly? I give credit for Utah State for bouncing back and not quitting. But I look at New Mexico, and they were a program that hasn't played at home, has played every game on the road, has COVID issues. So they're playing this, they are a bunch of gypsies on the road playing the season. This Air Force team is not. You have cadets who are completely regimented. You are strict. You are tight. You just held New Mexico to a season low, 304 yards or last game. You held San Jose State to a season low. This is a team that is prepared, is ready, only allows 3.5 yards rush against the Utah State team that did rush for over 200 yards and 5.5 yards per carry. So while I made a horrible bet playing against Utah State last week, this is by no means this same situation. This Falcons team is basically laying what the New Mexico team laid, and this team is hardcore, ready to go. They're 2-2 so far this season. It's a big game to win, to be above 500 for them. And I actually do lean the Falcons in this game to right things against Utah State.
In Ralph, I wanted to ask you a question about Air Force, because I know this is a team we kind of broke down in depth coming into the season on this show, actually, with Robbie Vino. And they were without a lot of the guys from last year's squad. Whatever happened with that, with all the guys that I guess couldn't play? There was something with the actual Air Force Academy. Do you remember that in the
most of them just didn't play. There was over 30 kids that were supposed to be on the roster that didn't end up playing this year. But you have to remember, Air Force also has a lot of young kids that play JV ball, so they don't play a lot of freshmen. The freshmen play JV. Same with, Army and Navy. They have their plebes and their undergraduate class. So they've had to play younger kids. But again, in this time, why are academy teams such good dogs? Why do academy teams do so well in bowls where there's all their other distractions? Because they're getting up at 5 a.m. practicing and then going to computer classes and learning how to fly jets and protecting our country and how to fix warships. I mean, This football is just one part of their regiment. That's why the COVID doesn't affect them. That's why going on the road doesn't affect them. That's why when other teams get bothered, you can count on the military academies, again, in those dog rolls and in the bowl rolls really stick out because the surrounding noise doesn't affect them one iota.
Sure, Ralph. And just to add on to what you're saying, I think Troy Calhoun's done a good job with the kind of discipline on this team, like you talked about with Army, Navy, Air Force, that type of discipline, I think goes a long way, especially in this situation. You're going on the road to Logan, Utah, which is a tough place to play. Let's face it. I mean, Utah State is 9-3, their last 12 in conference home games. So they've been good at home here. And Air Force just 2-2 on the year, both straight up and ATS. And they're going to be going on a tough road trip, mainly because it's a tough place to get from everything I've heard in Logan, Utah. It's not like you can just fly in there. It takes a bus as well. And it's going to be 28 degrees projected temperature here, Ralph. No wind, pretty clear skies, but still the temperature is something to kind of, just have in the back of your mind. It's going to be 22% capacity in Maverick Stadium in Logan, Utah. Utah State off of their best week, you talked about it against New Mexico, which I personally bet New Mexico as well. I just looked at that game. It was on Thanksgiving, singled out game. I felt like, the degenerate in me had to bet it just because it was the only college football game on that day. And it was an 0-4 team laying 6. I just was like, man, that's got to be profile of bet. The market's telling us something. Sure enough, it didn't. And it was the absolute wrong side, like you talked about. But, one thing that they did is they swept the Mountain West in terms of player recognition. They had the offensive player of the week, the defensive player of the week, and the special teams player of the week. Their quarterback and a defensive lineman being 2 of those. And this year, Utah State, they had 19 players make their first start, 26 players make their debut. So a young team, very inexperienced in terms of college football. Plus the fact their head coach is gone from the start of the year. Gary Anderson was shown the door. Their quarterback, like you said, Shelley, dismissed for unknown reasons, probably not very good. Their top wide receiver not on the roster anymore. Safety, outside linebacker gone. Running back gone. So this is not only an inexperienced team coming into the season, it's even more inexperienced now. And they're coming off of their best game, which speaks to, sometimes if a season isn't going well, which it wasn't for Utah State, 0-4, and now it just changes. You're not good and a bunch of your players and your head coach are now gone. Sometimes you get new leadership and people are motivated. So I'm kind of a little bit worried to go against that, Ralph. Kind of like a buy low here on Utah State, like you talked about. Their strength of schedule was great out the start. Now it starts to lag. Air Force, that's why I asked you about Air Force, because it's a team that I haven't seen a lot of. And I don't like betting against the military academies. And, the option in this kind of attack, it's a short week for Utah State. No, it's not a short week. It's actually a full week to prepare, and they're at home against the option. So that's why I think Utah State could have some success, but I don't like going against the military academy. So that was a long way of saying I'm really struggling sidewise on this, Ralph.
Yeah, again, it's a game where will it make my card? Absolutely not. Will I be interested to see how Utah State responds? Absolutely. Is it the start of the momentum, or is it just one of those blips that we see on the screen all the time, Drew, that there's a lot of Joe Public that overreacts, especially in the NFL, when all of a sudden a team has a good game that they're turned around and they're healthy. So, when you're watching a game and you're learning from a game, it often takes 2 games to finish that learning process, because we saw what happened Thanksgiving. Now we need to see if they are going to reaffirm that, or if it was a blip. So again, a 2-game process to learn about what when a team is changing from a losing to a winning or a winning to a losing. So this is the wait and see and learn week, and then we move on from there.
So that's the Thursday nighter there, Ralph. Air Force versus Utah State. That's the breakdown for the Thursday night. We got Friday night action. This is a good one. I'm excited for this one in the Sun Belt, and we got weather being part of it. So it's kind of a tricky handicap here, Ralph, as we got Friday night lights action, guys. 8:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Likely a lot of tickets written here, guys. We got number 20th ranked Louisiana Lafayette at App State here. Looks like 53.5 being the total, Ralph. We got -2 in the hook, -2.5. That's App State laying at home in Boone, North Carolina. It looks like 40 degrees, rain. This is going to be a fun one to watch, Ralph. Are you interested in getting involved?
Well, you have to remember this. I mean, this is the first time that, ULL's been there in a long time. I mean, they used to be a dominant team in the Sun Belt, but, we've seen them struggle. We've seen App State be the power. So, with that being said, we have an App State team which has handled this team 8 straight times. So App State has to feel good about themselves. We see a ULL team, though, that is 8-3-1 as a dog. So they haven't been a dog very often. And they are a dog now. And, that's always a position you're going to look at. You look at ULL's only loss this year. It was against Coastal Carolina. And it was a 1 point, and it was a 1 point, and it was only a 1 point loss. So, we're looking at a situation where we have the 2 best teams. Well, at Coastal, the 3 best teams. I was looking at my power ratings. There's only my power ratings in the Sun Belt and the lower the number, the better. Coastal 23, ULL 25, and App State 26. So the 3 best teams in the Sun Belt, I only have a 3-point difference with these 2 being 2 apart. So, I go back and forth, and really, I'm struggling at this one because it's a game where, do I lean with the home team? Yes. Do I expect App State to lose at home? No. Their losses this year at Marshall, who has a great defense, and they only lost 17-7. At Coastal Carolina, they lost by 10, but they had a yardage edge, and they were -2 turnovers. So I look around and I say, I like App State in the home field. Are the points worth laying? Yes. But then when I turn to ULL and I look at their balance, you have Lewis, who's passed for 2,000 yards, and he rushed for 230 plus yards. You have Mitchell and Ragus running the ball. You're averaging almost 6.0 yards per carry running the ball. And anytime you have a dog that can rush for 6.0 yards per carry, you're going to be on that dog. So I love both teams. And, it's a game where I can say, okay, I want to give you guys more, but this is a Sun Belt game that is worth watching to me. And I am really going to just watch. I cannot fade App State at home in that role. I cannot fade UL as a dog in that role. So I'm going to wait to hear what you say and hopefully give our listeners something more meaningful than I just babbled about the last couple minutes.
No, Ralph, your stuff's always good, man. I'm always interested in your opinion because you bring analytics into it, and I know you know the sport very well. Sunbelt, we're kind of right up my alley. I kind of live for this stuff. We got Louisiana at App State, Boone, North Carolina, tough place to play. And I bring up the weather because I think it's going to matter, and I'll tell you in my analysis, 40 degrees and rainy. Interesting note here, both of these 2 teams, the only 2 participants in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game in the history of the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. Now, it's only been going 2 years, but the only 2 teams to win the East and the West divisions of the Sun Belt are these 2 teams. Now, interestingly enough, both of their losses to Coastal Carolina But both of those were kind of toss-up games, like you talked about. Louisiana lost, I think, by 1 point. App State, the score actually looked a little bit worse than it was. It was really a toss-up game in itself. App State also losing to Marshall. Now, App State in the market, Ralph, has kind of been overvalued. They're 7-2 straight up, but they're only 2-7 ATS. So that's something that I kind of worry about. I don't like going into bed with teams that are 2-7 ATS. Whereas on the flip side, Louisiana 8-1 straight up, 4-5 ATS, priced a little bit more appropriately here. The head coach is Billy Napier for Louisiana. This could very well be his last season in Lafayette. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a bigger job in the offseason. And head coach Sean Clark for App State. Now, Sean Clark, this is one thing I was worried about App State coming into the season. It's kind of come to fruition in the betting markets. You know, they had a head coach go to Louisville, the next head coach go to Missouri. It might have been flipped on that. And then Sean Clark gets the job. So he was a former offensive line coach. I think he kind of jumped up maybe a little bit too quickly. And App State really hasn't been as dominant as they've been in the past, at least by my view. And now they're having to go up against Louisiana, which in terms of quarterback in the Sun Belt Conference, and I know Coastal Carolina's quarterback's good, but in terms of top talent, he's just kind of in the system. He's also only a freshman. Number one for Louisiana, the lefty, I believe his name is Lewis. This guy's real good. When you're watching him on Friday night, it's almost like athletically speaking, he's got, you know, he might be playing on Sundays, maybe not at the quarterback position, but he can run around with the best of them. He can also throw it pretty good too. And at the skill positions, Louisiana's top in the Sun Belt, in my opinion. They just recruit very well, you know, down there in Louisiana, depending what year you're talking about per capita, arguably the best recruiting state in the country. And they've done very well. In terms of what I'm looking to bet here, I just think the quarterback advantage is to Louisiana over App State. Zach Thomas, first of all, he's banged up. I know he's a senior, but he just doesn't do as much with his feet that Lewis can do. The thing that worries me here, Ralph, and I'm going to be on Louisiana or pass, likely on Louisiana, but the thing I'm worried about when I think about, you know, where am I going to be wrong? 40 degrees and rainy, and it's in Boone, North Carolina. That's a huge advantage to App State, not only because they're at home, but because the rain and slippage. Lewis's game is more making things happen with his feet. So I think the weather is going to kind of constrict Louisiana's offense a little bit more than it is App State's, which is more run at you, play action off of that. So that's what worries me about betting the Raging Cajuns. However, I just think skill level, a little bit more to play for now that App State's kind of been knocked out of the Sun Belt Championship game. I believe it's already confirmed that it will be Louisiana versus Coastal Carolina. Louisiana with a chance to knock off Coastal Carolina, therefore beating every team on their schedule and having an outside shot at the New Year's Six Bowl. So all of that leading me to Louisiana plus the 2.5. However, I haven't bet this personally, guys. I'm hoping it gets to 3, and then I would jump on the +3, get that extra 0.5 point, Ralph. So that's what I'm looking to bet.
You know, Drew, I read that too somewhere, that the championship is set. But how can it be set? They both have one loss to Coastal. So
yeah,
why, if App State beats ULL and the ULL has 2 losses, would they jump App State? Because App State's in Coastal's division. Duh. Okay. I forgot they went division. So that's a brain fart, guys. That's what it looks like when you get old and your brain fart just goes out the window. So
no, that has more to do with we're actually doing this live, guys, if you're watching on replay.
So yes, it's the Sun Belt, again, in divisions now. So, you know, the West has Louisiana, Arkansas State, ULM, Texas State, and South Alabama. So they are a clinch to get there, where, you know, the East, App State, Coastal Carolina, Troy, Georgia State, Georgia Southern. It's sort of like the Big Ten East and West, how one-sided it is in the Sun Belt divisions.
Yeah, I know for sure. It's, you know, like, heck, you can make the argument the SEC is like that. So a lot of conferences are actually like that now. But yeah, so I'm leaning here towards Louisiana, especially I'm looking for the +3 anyway on Friday Night Lights. So we got Saturday action here, guys. Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
This game, you know, this game was supposed to be on ESPN2 or News, and it did get moved to the main ESPN channel.
We got Liberty at Coastal Carolina. This is Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. This is the College Game Day. ESPN College Game Day will be there in outside of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I believe it's in Conway, South Carolina. Top 25 matchup here, Ralph. 351, 352. 25th ranked Liberty, the Flames, catching 7 on the road at Coastal Carolina, who's 14th ranked. Looks like 57 being the total, and it's 7 or 6.5. So make sure to shop around, guys, whichever side you're liking. As we're talking, if you're watching on replay, we're talking right now on Tuesday, so these numbers could move. But we got Liberty at Coastal Carolina. What are you thinking here, Ralph?
You want to talk about a game to watch? Someone talked about game day on Monday, and I said, yeah, I am all for these two having game days.
Yeah.
Is Hugh Freeze going to be the next head coach of South Carolina? We'll see. He's not going to be at Liberty very long. Jamie Gadwell, I mean, what a job at Coastal Carolina. So, you look at teams, they have one loss between them, and that loss was Liberty at NC State by 1 point. So you are talking two big games. I think game day, and I think Coastal Carolina being number 14 is a huge negative for them. This is a team that now is thinking, okay, we already clinched our division. We know we have home field edge against ULL December 19th. All we got to do is beat Liberty. We're beating a ranked team. Then we play Troy. Then we beat ULL, and we're undefeated. And let's see where that gets us. So when you have kids, there's no way in the world these kids aren't thinking, it'll never happen. But there's no way these kids are thinking, well, if everything happens and every BCS team loses twice and everyone else loses, there's a chance we get there. And you never know what kind of bowl we're going to get in this year. So, Grayson McCall is dynamic. There's no question. He was banged up a little bit there. But, if we're talking about a kid with a 20 touchdown and 1 interception ratio, that's pretty good. So you look at what they've done, they're plus 126 yards per game, but they don't have that dynamic of an offense. They don't have that dynamic of a defense. They just do everything well. They don't turn the ball over very often. They've only been sacked 10 times. And again, you're only sacked 10 times because you do have a very mobile Grayson McCall. On the flip side, Mac Willis, leading passer, leading rusher. He has 800 yards receiving, but they've been sacked 21 times. He does sit back sometimes, and he does try to pass the ball. He doesn't take off more. I think he'll take off a lot earlier here. They got the disappointment out of their way off that NC State loss by crushing UMass 45-0. They've gone on the road. This isn't a bad road schedule, guys. You go to Western Kentucky, you win 30-24. You go to Syracuse, you win 38-21. You go to Virginia Tech, you win 38-35. You go to NC State, you lose by 1. And now you go to an undefeated number 15 Coastal Carolina. I actually do like Liberty a little bit in this one. I think Coastal's going to come out so excited. I think they're going to be overexcited. I think they're going to be so hyped up. And this Liberty team, Hugh Freeze last year played a hell of a schedule. Last year, they played Syracuse, they played Buffalo, they played Rutgers, they played BYU, they played Virginia. So they're accustomed to these big games where Coastal's not. They did good at Kansas. Coastal didn't win their opener. But again, that's a Kansas team that, isn't very good. Their other big games are all Sun Belt games to this point. So I'm going to give a big edge here to Liberty, who they've scheduled, who they've played. They know they can go on the road and beat anyone. I mean, they're not going to be Clemson. Let's not get silly. But for you to beat Syracuse by 17 and you to beat Virginia Tech and you to be in that game at NC State to the final buzzer, you can win this game. So, those reasons really does have me leaning with Liberty in this game. Will it get to my card? I don't think so. I don't have enough margin from where it is to where my power ratings are. But the intangibles are a big double check mark for me for the Flames.
I'm with you, Ralph. I think the Flames are the side here too. Obviously, a couple things scaring me about the Coastal Carolina side. One, like you talked about, Jamie Chadwell has done a great job. You can just tell that they're a very well-coached team. But you talked about the scheduling. And Coastal Carolina, yes, they did beat Louisiana Lafayette and App State. but one, they were both very competitive games here. Outside of that, it's kind of been a light schedule here for Coastal Carolina. 9-0 straight up, 8-1 against the spread. You can't kind of shake your head at that. They've been a money maker. But here's the kicker. Liberty's 8-1 straight up with their only loss, a 1-point loss to NC State, an ACC team. And they're 8-1 ATS. So they're the same money maker here, talking about the Flames that Coastal Carolina is. And Hugh Freeze, a great college coach. I mean, you can say whatever you want about him off the field, but on the field, he can really coach him up. He can also recruit. Whether he's doing it legally is another question, but not legally, but by the rules.
You had to go there, didn't you?
I mean, it is what it is. But a couple of interesting notes here, just researching this game. One, these two teams used to be in-conference rivals in the Big South Conference from 2003 to 2016. Actually, they met every single year, 7-7 in the series. So, in terms of possibly the coaches, anyway, the administration, they know each other. Now, as for the kids, I think Malik Willis just makes more plays than Grayson McCall does. Like I kind of talked about when talking about Lewis for Louisiana against McCall. McCall is a good quarterback, no doubt about it. He's just young, and he's more of a works in the system. Whereas Malik Willis can kind of, when the play breaks down, make something happen with his feet a little bit more. Plus the fact I think Liberty's skill position talent is a little bit more talented, a little bit sexier in terms of playmaking ability than I think Coastal Carolina's is. Now, Coastal Carolina in the trenches, I think is good as any, lower conference team in terms of group of five out there. I just think Liberty has the more top line talent at the skill positions. They're 5-0 ATS their last 5 games. They've been playing really good football. I'll take the underdog here. I like the +7 if you're making me bet it, Ralph.
I'm just looking up the college football stat compare sheet that I do every week. It's up Sundays at Wager Talk. If you just go to my homepage, it's free. Let's compare the 3 major categories for these two teams. Coastal Carolina plus 21.9 points per game. That's number 9 in college football. Liberty's plus 19.1 game. That's number 12. Toss up. Coastal plus 126 yards per game. Diff. That's number 15th. Liberty plus 182, they're number 7. And then yards per play, which to me is the biggest category. Liberty's plus 1.7 yards per play, number 11. Coastal's plus 1.6, number 14. So all of those are close. Strength of schedule, not close. Coastal Carolina's played the number 85 schedule. Number 85 to number 112. So we see a huge strength of schedule difference, obviously, with Liberty and who they've played in their conferences. So when the stats are close like that, there's a huge strength of schedule difference. It's something you really have to look at when you're comparing two teams.
Yeah, good points there, Ralph. Follow him on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Great follow on Twitter. Myself, not as good of a follow, I would say, but at Drew Martin Bets. Feel free to shout out any questions, anything you want answered on the show. Also on the Every Game on the Board. We'll get out there as well. Huge shout out to the chat box. Chris McCann, welcome in, buddy. Eagles bandwagon, Corey Williams, all you guys in here. City by the Bay. Just a little caveat here before we get to the Degenerate special, Ralph. They're talking a lot in the chat box here about Alabama and LSU. We're seeing 28.5, 67 being the total. Any quick thoughts off the top of your head? You think Alabama is kind of motivated to cover a big spread against LSU?
Stay tuned to my best bet.
All right, we'll hit that in the best bet, guys.
Let's give a shout out to Rob for those thinking, where the heck's Rob? A little under the weather today. So, Rob, hopefully you're feeling better. Hopefully you're watching, Rob.
Oh yeah, I figured if he was feeling well enough to watch the show, he would be on the show. So I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. Yeah, Ralph, or like Ralph said, Robbie Vino is a little bit under the weather. Maybe not a little bit. I don't know. Hopefully he is okay. But yeah, he couldn't make it today, guys. So that's why Vino isn't here. But feel free to shout him out on Twitter at Rob Vino Sports, and hopefully he'll be back in good health next week. But we do have the Degenerate special here, Ralph. 10:30 Eastern kick in the Pac-12. We're talking Herm Edwards. You play to win the game versus Chip Kelly in UCLA. We're talking UCLA at Arizona State. Fox Sports 1 is airing it. 10:30 Eastern kick, 55.5 being the total, -3 on Arizona State and the Sun Devils here in the desert. Ralph, what are you thinking in the Degenerate Special?
This is the best Degenerate Special we've ever had. And are you allowed to give it another name? Isn't it already Pac-12 After Dark?
We can call it whatever we want.
All right. It's the Drew Law. Drew's allowed to call it whatever the hell he wants. I'll tell you what. I was not a Chip Kelly fan his first couple years at UCLA, and he came back this year with 13 returning starters, and they finally have some fight to them. I mean, even without DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the last couple games, to knock off Arizona like they did, to do what they did against Oregon. They ended up losing by 3 at Autzen, but they had a 462 to 422 yard edge. You have that rush attack that, everyone thinks Chip Kelly fast-paced throw the ball a lot, but really you need to run the ball. UCLA averaging 242 yards this year, 5.2 yards per carry. You've played your last 2 weeks, and you've played awesome without your quarterback. On the flip side, you have an Arizona State team that hasn't played for a few weeks, has COVID issues, only has played one game to where this is UCLA's 5th game. There's only one way I can go. I mean, while my power ratings, actually lean Arizona State, that's because I haven't been able to make any adjustments. The game at USC, their only game they played, looked close, 28-27. But that was because of turnovers. They were actually outgained by 164 yards per game. UCLA is still in my mix. They're at the bottom of my mix. But when you can run the ball like you have, the defense is so improved. They held Oregon to a season low. They held Cal to a season low, and they held Arizona to a season low. When you can hold opponents to a season low back-to-back games, you're finally playing defense. So I have a running team that's played every week with a defense that has season lows against a team that hasn't played multiple weeks. There's only one way I can go, and that's the Bruins. Are they strong enough to get to my card? Well, we'll see what reading says the next couple days. With COVID, I haven't put out very many plays early in the week, wanting to wait to see who's available and what the deal are. But it's Bruins or nothing for me.
Bruins are nothing. And you brought up some great stats in terms of their defense, Ralph. And you're right. Just looking at the stats here, they've been holding teams to season low. I mean, now granted, Arizona State in their one game against USC did look pretty good, I think, overall. That was a game where they were leading most of the way, and USC came back in the last couple minutes of the game, throwing 2 touchdowns at the end to win it. But the COVID issues are what worry me as well. What you were speaking to, I mean, Arizona State, I'm trying to think back because they only had one game. I don't think they were going very much up tempo. Do you lean to the under here at 55.5 as well?
They only ran 61 plays against USC.
Yeah.
USC ran 95 plays. So, their defense was on the field a lot, but that's because, as you said, they were up 17-14 at halftime, and the yards were pretty close at halftime. So a good point bringing up very misleading yardage totals, having that lead against USC. But again, you still gave up 175 rushing yards to a USC team, which isn't known for rushing, and you still allowed 556 yards and 28 first downs to USC. So, a concern for me there.
Okay, and whenever you're betting totals, guys, in these late night Saturday affairs, the Degenerate Special type, if you're looking to bet the under, you may want to wait because a lot of public's likely going to be on the over. And, they're in Tempe, likely no weather issues, although always check in the month of December. I don't know. I lean UCLA with you, Ralph. I think that what Chip Kelly's been able to do out the gate was terrible. But no matter what the quarterback is, I don't even think it's really a quarterback thing. The backup's pretty good too. It's defensively. They're playing very well. So it would be UCLA or pass for me as well. It's a game that I haven't bet either, but I guess lean under and lean UCLA as well. Follow on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. We'll likely have something on this game before Saturday night. At Cal Sports LV for Ralph. He's always throwing out good information. Again, guys, huge shout out to the chat box. And if you're liking the content, please smash the like button. If you're watching on replay, feel free to drop a comment below on YouTube. Corey Williams, Eagles bandwagon, Chris McCann, James Mounts, all you guys. Jack's Pick Phone, welcome in. Feel free to throw out your best bet in the chat box before we shut it down. And yes, Johnny Outlaw, every game on the board tomorrow starting at 12:15 with Mid-Major Matt in the first segment up. But we got time here. 4 best bets, Ralph. Throw it over to you. Alabama, LSU. I think you were leading into it, man.
Well, for the 4th straight week, I'm going to use Alabama first half.
All right.
I talked last week and, I said, Alabama, you guys that know me and have seen me on other shows, you know how I hate the word revenge, because every game in football is basically a revenge game. Somebody lost the last time. But when you lose to Auburn on the final game of the regular season and that keeps you from the playoffs, well, that is a different type of revenge, and that is something that even an Alabama team will take up. So now we're looking at Alabama, and now we're talking about lone home loss revenge, which is something meaningful as well. So what does that mean? Well, if you've played your college football schedule and you only lost one game at home, those are games that you remember. And if you remember last year, that game was 46-41, and LSU put up 559 yards and 29 first downs. Joey Burrow passed for 393 yards. So, Alabama loaded up. They struggled a little bit against Auburn's defense the first quarter. And then we saw them score 3 straight times to get to that 21 and win the first half bet last year. And while LSU's defense is really playing far better than they were the first few games. I mean, LSU was, Rob would make fun of it all the time, giving up 632 yards to the Mississippi State team that got shut out multiple games, giving up 586 yards to Missouri. I'm going to say they improved, but I'm also going to put an asterisk on it. When you look at South Carolina, they gave up 403. Well, that wasn't actually good. The number looks good because it's lower than the other numbers, but it was actually Carolina's seventh best performance. So there were so many other people that did better than that. And then the A&M game, they gave them only 267 yards last week. But again, that was wind and rain. So I think their defense is gonna struggle early. Maybe they make some adjustments, but the first number I'm seeing, they're just starting to post half times, Drew. I only see one number out right now. It's -16.5. I'm going to take it. I'm looking at 28-3 first half. Bama's not going to get slowed. And even if it's 28-7, and LSU gets a score, I'm happy to lay the 16.5 in that one.
So Alabama -16.5 for best bets, Ralph?
You got it.
All right. Putting that down for record-keeping purposes versus LSU. So hopefully guys that fixes the chat box want for the analysis on the Alabama LSU game. We didn't put it on the top 3. Just normally, obviously, it would. Game of the year, game of the century title for that matchup for a couple of the last 5 years. But this year, we had a good group of 5 discussion, I thought. So for my best bet, guys, I'm heading to Maction. We got Ball State versus Central Michigan. Central Michigan -1.5 with a total of 61. I'll go with 61.5. Of course, I'm speaking towards the total here. We got Ball State and Central Michigan, the Chippewas. Both offenses, both quarterbacks, actually, I think pretty good here. No matter who plays quarterback for Central Michigan, I think if the original starter comes back, he's really good. The backup, I think, can throw it around pretty good as well. But overall, I think both offensive units are the 2 top units on the field. I think both defenses somewhat struggle a little bit. So here we got a 61 as the total. CMU versus Ball State. I'm going over 61.5. So that is the best bets. Central Michigan, Ball State over 61.5 for me. We got Alabama -16.5 in the first half for Ralph. So Ralph on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Give him a follow. Anything you want to throw out here before we shut this down, Ralph?
Yeah, I did actually look on Central's report. They do only have Ty Brock listed, so they don't even have an and or. So it is going to be the backup, as Daniel Richardson still a little bit banged up. But as you mentioned, your second string is fine, and you're happy the way they move the ball, putting up 553 yards at Eastern Michigan and rushing for 318 yards is certainly a performance.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those situations. Even coming into the year, they were talking about they didn't know who really won the job, and both guys have kind of played. So I wouldn't kind of downgrade him too much offensively. But
no one's coached better than McElwain. I mean, I'll tell you what. That there's certain times where you get a retread coach that just knows what the hell he's doing, and he's still excited to be there, and he takes the team to a new level. I mean, what McElwain has done in his year and a half at Central Michigan has just been incredible.
Yeah, for sure, Ralph. And Alabama, speaking to yours, minus 16 in the hook. What is Nick Saban going to be back on the sidelines? Do you know?
I don't know. So, but I don't know when he tested. If it's the 10-day rule, I think the SEC has 10-day rules. Every conference is different. So, he said he watched the TV. He wanted to kick the TV a few times as he was watching the game. But, I'm sure there was a phone connected to someone's ear where he was chirping in, and we'll see. But again, you're talking about a disciplined team with multiple assistants that be head coaches. That's the big difference. When you get in these programs like Ohio State and Alabama and Clemson, and your DCs are good enough and your OCs are good enough or have been head coaches or are good enough to be head coaches, it's so much less of a worry than, you have a first-year head coach who's bringing in all these young assistants that don't know his schemes, that don't know the way he calls games. So no concern either way for me in the Bama game.
He's Ralph Michaels. I am Drew Martin. Robbie Vino will likely be back with us next week. Give him a shout out on Twitter at Rob Vino Sports. He was feeling a little bit under the weather, but hopefully you guys like the show. If you could smash the like button on your way out, that will help us out. Check out Sports Memo, wagertalk.com. It's $2 Tuesday. We got the special Cyber Week here, discounted for 6 months, I believe under $100 a month. So check that out as well. But for Ralph Michaels,